All right, we are right at 4 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to have some attendees likely pop in, but you guys let me know, or let us know, use the Q&A, let us know any questions that you're wanting in between all of our other questions that we are asking here. And really, we'll just start with some quick introductions. So let me start and introduce my team. You're going to see I am your Employer Relations Coordinator, Meredith Copeland, here in the Career Development Office with Angelo State. We have Julie Ruthenbeck, who is our Director with Career Development, and Adra Enos is our Office Coordinator, or the person who keeps everything running smoothly in our office. And so utilize us, reach out to us if you need us. So we have brought to you a panel really all geared around STEM. We have Bradley Nielsen with Kleinfelder, who is an engineer, and he'll tell you a little bit more about him in a moment. And Amanda Martins with Halliburton, who is an engineer by school, but she is also their recruiter there at Halliburton. And then we will soon have, later on in the call, join us Janelle, who is senior recruiter with Kleinfelder, who will be available during the Q&A for any specific questions that you guys may have about opportunities and stuff like that. So let me just go ahead and open it up to the panel. And Amanda, we will start with you. Tell us a little bit about you, your role, and Halliburton.
Yeah, so just I want to clear something up really quick. I am not an engineer by trade. I have a chemistry major from Texas Tech. Totally okay.
My fault.
I appreciate you thinking me that I'm an engineer, but I am not, unfortunately. So I have a chemistry degree from Texas Tech. I also have an HR degree from the University of Houston in Texas. But I am a very proud recruiter, university recruiting specialist at Halliburton. I'm currently pursuing a master's degree at Texas A&M. So I have degrees, just none of them in engineering so far, but you never know. So like Meredith said, I am a university recruiting specialist at Halliburton, which basically just means I target certain universities to fill in our summer internship as well as our entry-level recruiting aspect for all STEM focused. Halliburton, if you guys don't know what Halliburton is, we are an oil and gas service provider, which is very different from an oil and gas company. I always like to think of it like a house. We might not own the house when it's being built, but we own the processes that go behind making it a house. So we own the washing machine, the electricity, all those like good small things that generally make up the house. So we don't own the oil at the end of the day, but we provide all the engineering, the technology, the equipment for people, for oil and gas companies to go and get that oil at the end of the day. So yeah, that's a little bit about Halliburton and about me.
Awesome. So Bradley, we will pass the mic to you, so to say, over the virtual piece, and tell us a little bit about your role with Kleinfelder and Kleinfelder itself.
Sure. So I'm Brad Nielsen, project manager for Kleinfelder. My background, my undergrad is in geological engineering, and then I have a master's in business, and then I have a professional engineering license in civil. So I have a broad spectrum there. But I started with Kleinfelder almost 10 years ago, so about 9.5 years ago, and I came as a field engineer. So I've been with them about 10 years. Kleinfelder is a engineering and environmental consulting company. We provide geotechnical, construction material, design, engineering design, and then environmental services to a wide range of clients. We have offices across the country and in Canada and Australia, but we're still relatively small in terms of the consulting firms such as AECOM or Jacobs or something like that. We were about 2,500, but a good presence across the United States. I personally support a portfolio of large oil and gas client sites. We help them manage their environmental, property owner, and regulatory liabilities. So if you think about the house example Amanda gave, we kind of come in towards the end where that house is trying to be sold and kind of help help fix up the house so it can be sold to the next person, or limit any sort of liabilities that are associated with it. What else? I would, do you want me to go into my background with starting with Kleinfelder, or is that enough?
Yeah, no, that'd be great if you want to start there, because let me kind of add this for all of the attendees. You guys are who we are here for. So as you are listening to their stories and listening to their background, they are here to answer your questions as well. So pop those into the Q&A, let us know. Use the chat box as well to communicate with everybody on the webinar. We're here for you. And so we're going to be talking about the company and their culture and their roles and any stories that they may have and advice. So let us know what you want to hear, because that's where we're at, and we will open that Q&A towards the end. But go ahead, Brad, and take us into that role and how you got started with Kleinfelder.
Okay. So I mentioned Kleinfelder has a number of different services that we help support. I personally got into the environmental group and was working a lot of the environmental side. But we also have geotechnical or construction material design, and that process is relatively the same no matter what group you're in. So I came in as a field engineer. So I spend about 80% of my time in the field to begin with. One of the things I was excited about getting in with Kleinfelder was the opportunity to gain a lot of experience. We were working a lot of projects. I had limited experience coming out of college. So the opportunity to get in the field, get the hands-on experience, have an understanding of what we're doing, why we're doing it, that excited me. So I would say my first 4 to 5 years, about 80% of my time was in the field, either leading or executing field work. Purpose behind that field work would be really to collect the field data that would then be generated to make recommendations or solutions for the client. So the way it works is you have a client who has a problem. We then provide that a work plan to the client saying, this is how we think we can solve that problem. This is the data we need to collect. And we go out and we collect that data and we process it, and we try to give them recommendations or solutions to their problem. And so whether you're in environmental, you're in COMET, you're in geotech, that process is relatively the same, and it's that field engineer's job to collect that data and collect it accurately.
So Amanda, I'll pose it to you as well. I know you've got a chemistry, so I apologize. That was my fault. But your chemistry degree and an HR degree, which is interesting combination there. So how did you get started with Halliburton and move from that chemistry to the HR role as well? Give you that opportunity.
Yeah, so when I graduated from Texas Tech, I was actually working full time in a chemistry lab, and I loved it because it used my brain. It really made me use my degree, and I loved chemistry because I was good at chemistry in high school. I ended up not loving the social side. I'm very much a social butterfly, and I struggled with that, not having interactions with other people in your workplace, because chemistry or a degree in usually more of the lab sciences is very individual based. And I really struggled with that. And I ended up having a cousin that was in HR, and she was like, you should try out HR, see what they kind of like. So I did some minor classes, and I was like, oh man, I feel really bad, but I'm in love with this. So I ended up going to U of H, getting an HR degree, and then it took me about 1.5 years, and then I went full force into HR. So I started out in a smaller manufacturing company, a heavy manufacturing company, where I kind of got my skills in HR, being surrounded by so many people that were so seasonally professional. And then I got into another larger manufacturing company where I was involved in like the recruiting processes a little bit more. And what I noticed from there was basically I enjoyed working and recruiting a lot of the engineering focus, the STEM focused, because when managers would talk to me about their projects and what they're looking for, they were able to go a little bit more in depth with those projects than with me than they would another recruiter who just didn't understand the mechanics behind a project or the understanding behind the project. From there, I joined Halliburton. So I've been at Halliburton for about a year and a half right now. But Halliburton's no stranger to me. My dad's been working for the company for 37 years. He's based in England. I have two older brothers that are field engineers. One's in Saudi Arabia, one's in Australia. And growing up, I was like, I'm never going to work for Halliburton. Oh God, no way am I going to work for Halliburton. And then I ended up actually meeting my current manager at a networking event. And I fell in love with the manager. I loved her team. I loved the projects that she was creating. And then suddenly out of the blue, she gave me a call and was like, would you want to join my team? So even though I had no interest in joining Halliburton previously, I ended up joining Halliburton and just loving the work that I'm doing, loving our mission behind the projects and the events that we create. So I always like to say, like, I jokingly, my dad is like, oh, I brought you into the family business. It was going to happen eventually. Might as well happen now. So I'm a very proud, we like to call it like a big red family. But now, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I would have said never. You would never catch me dead in a Halliburton t-shirt or a polo that I had growing up. But now I'm wearing them all the time.
So you guys talk a little bit about your career path and some of the things that you learned along the way. What advice, I'm going to open this up to both of you, but what advice would you give our students as they get into that and they start getting some of that hands-on experience and choosing those forks in the road as they get into that career? What advice would you guys give them?
I think Amanda made a really good point, is keeping your options open. What I would have thought I wanted to do 10 years ago when I started getting into the workforce is not what I'm doing now, and it's not what I want to do now. But it's keeping that open mind as you go through the process, taking as many opportunities as you can. One thing I tell our new hires is do as many different jobs as you can, because you want that broad background. If you do a job and it didn't go great, you didn't have a good time, you know not to do it again, right? But if you don't, you try to narrow yourself into a certain way, you're going to get 10 years, 20 years down the road and realize, well, I wish I would have tried this avenue. I wish I would have tried that. When you're getting into your career, the best thing you can do is try to just broaden the things you're exposed to as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean,
Amanda, do you have? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll definitely piggyback off Bradley's. Like, that was a really good thing. I don't think if I had kept my heart open and my mind open, I would have actually pursued HR. It would have probably been something that I would have been like, man, that could have been an option 20 years down the line. So definitely keep your eyes open. But my biggest advice to students, and it's something that I never took advantage of in school because I was like, man, this is never going to actually work for me, but networking, right? So that's going to those career fairs, using your career center. I was so dumb in college and I never went to my career center. But now when I'm actively working with the career center and I see students that I recruit, they're the ones that are actively going to the career center and checking in. There have been times I've reached out to a career center and been like, hey, this is really last minute, but do you know somebody that's an industrial engineer that's looking for an internship last minute? And they'd be like, yes, absolutely. This is a kid that's been in touch with us constantly. This is a great candidate. That means, going to those networking sessions that companies put on versus just the ones that your school puts on, or networking via LinkedIn. So for me, networking is something that I don't think a lot of college students take advantage of. And I think that's something that they actively should be doing.
And it's good to develop those skills now. Like when you're in college, you're going through the career center and you're developing those relationships with not just people in the university, but also those other companies you're pursuing. it's good skills to build when you get into your career, because you're gonna have to continue to do that. Once you get that job and you're advancing through your career steps, you're gonna want to know how to network in a way that's successful for you.
Well, and I think that brings us perfectly into kind of some of that culture fit and that piece. So we've heard, Amanda, we heard a direct story from you on how networking really changed your career path. It brought you into a company that you would have said, absolutely not, I'm not doing. But Brad, you guys talk about really consulting and working with multiple companies across the board as well. Both you guys and Halliburton do that. And so networking, both internally and externally within the company, seems to be pretty important. What would you say is really kind of the biggest key of somebody who's not used to that networking to kind of softly get themselves out there and start building those skill sets if they wait too late? So they didn't get it in college, maybe they waited till their senior year and they're really stepping outside of that comfort zone. Where would you suggest they start?
Personally, a good building block for getting to be more comfortable in a professional networking situation is joining student orgs. I think joining student orgs, especially then, going into leadership positions in student orgs, makes you more comfortable talking to large audiences. So multiple students, it's like hosting meetings, putting together events, whether, they're social events or community service events or whatnot. I think my biggest strength when it came to networking and talking to other professionals in a professional manner rather than a nervous chatter manner was because I built those skills up through student orgs, and that's multiple student orgs, academic ones that lined up with my degree plan, social orgs, whether it's a community service or fraternity or sorority. That's the best way, in my opinion, to build up those social skills or start to build up those social skills.
Yeah, and once you get into a position at a company, there's two things I tried to do. One was accidental, which was getting mentors. Right, I was lucky enough to develop a mentor relationship with a couple people throughout my career. Kleinfelder has since put in a mentor program in which you can connect with anybody really across the company that have similar interests, and we've outlined a plan on how to walk both parties through that mentorship. But having that mentor so that you can ask questions off of it. If you get into a situation where you don't know what to do, or you need help on something, having somebody there to rely on, and as you continue to have that one mentor, what I've experienced is you develop different mentors in different areas, and then you kind of grow that network, and then their network becomes your network, and it slowly grows. And that's something I didn't realize until I looked back about 8 years ago and realized, oh, wait a second, this all kind of stemmed from one person, and now my network's grown. The other rule I had was I never turned down a opportunity to be social with my coworkers, whether I worked with them on a project or not. So if they were going to lunch or like a happy hour after work, I always tried to make it. Our office had tried to do happy hours once a month, and so I always tried to make sure I made it and connected with my coworkers in that social environment and kind of got to know them personally, and that helped kind of develop professionally as well. And it helps with developing those skills. So when you're comfortable with them in a social setting, when you have to go into them in a professional setting, it's a little more comfortable.
So that is a great point too. So you're working with a lot of different coworkers. You likely don't know anybody when you come onto a company, right? Unless you've met them in a networking event or anything like that. It's definitely when you are entering in the career force, you are likely going to walk into an office full of strangers. And so as we talk about us and what we can do individually to set ourselves apart, what can we do to make ourselves a better teammate? Because I know both of you guys work in groups and with teams, and you're working across the piece. So what would you say from a culture perspective within the company makes a great team worker or teammate?
Reliability. If you're able to get your work done on time and to a certain standard, being that reliable every time is always a good chance to get you more work. And in the consulting world, when you kind of come in at entry level, you're dependent on other people's projects and getting plugged into other people's projects. And so as you perform on their projects and you're providing reliable, good work, that's always a good sign to get more work.
I think reliability is huge. Because if you can't deliver on the promises that you made, that's an automatic red flag. Managers are not going to trust you with more projects. They're not going to give you more responsibilities, which would help, that next promotion or that next assignment or new project. But also, I would encourage students when they start working not to be afraid to ask questions. Asking questions is not only it helps teach you new processes that you don't know, but it also forces you to be a little bit social. It forces you to go and ask people that you don't know, make that introduction of yourself, and then say, hey, it's nice to meet you. I don't really know about this function. Is there a way that we can set up some time and you can teach me about it? And 9 times out of 10, people are going to say absolutely yes. They're never going to say, oh my God, you don't know already, because every company, every single company has different processes or different systems that they use, or they might use the same system, but different ways in the system. So asking questions and then making those connections that way, and just broadening your connection, not only with your team, but then outside your team when you get, try to ask if you can be assigned to a different project or a project that involves multiple departments. Put your hat in the ring. Don't be afraid of rejection. I always tell students, like, the worst thing that somebody can say is no, and then they go on about their day. Like, they're not thinking about it for hours on end. They're not saying, oh my God, I can't believe Meredith asked me that question, or she dared to say, hey, can I join this project? No. That's literally, they say no, and then they move on to the next project that they're doing. They're not thinking about the repercussions on that. And then the best thing that they can say is yes. Yeah, absolutely. Come join our project, come join our team. So definitely putting yourself out there. It puts you in a vulnerable position, but it also greatens your chance of being involved and making a lasting impression on other teammates.
Okay, so let's talk about maybe some of the things that we wish we could have changed. So we talk about a lot of our background, but let's transition to some of those times in your career that you made a decision that maybe you wished you didn't make. Do either of you have a story that you could show how you recovered, what the decision was, and really why you wish you didn't make that decision?
I'll let Brady go first.
So I came in and I was hired with about 5 other people over a 6-month period. And we all ranged in different experience levels. I had very little to no experience, and then some of them had 5 years experience. And we all started tackling these projects together as a group. And we were working really closely together, and we had basically a portfolio that we were all working through. And it worked out really well, except I stayed pretty narrow into that subset of work. So I was doing a very particular job set multiple times, and I was able to advance within that group and that project pretty quickly, but I didn't gain a lot of other experiences outside of that. I've worked for the same client the last 10 years, and it's a great client, well-known client, prestigious portfolio, but it's still one client, right? So I would have used some opportunities that were provided that I didn't jump at earlier in my career to kind of broaden my background a little bit more. The other thing I'll do is I try not to make the same mistake twice. So the engineer in me, what I'll do is if I get corrected on something or somebody very politely tells me I've done something wrong, I need to adjust, I'll try to document that. And then I'll refer back to it when I'm doing something similar. So that way I don't make the same mistake twice, which kind of goes back to the earlier conversation on reliability, right? So for the most part, people understand you're human, you're going to make a mistake, or you're not familiar with this, you're going to make a mistake. But if you continue to make that mistake over and over again, you're not going to be viewed as reliable. But if you're able to document, fix the mistake, and then never make it again, it's viewed a lot differently.
Yeah, for me, along the lines of like a mistake, my first corporate position, which was my job before Halliburton, it was a very huge corporate company, and I think I struggled with moving from like a small mom and pop company to a corporate position, and I messed up, as everybody does, but personally, I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. I don't like making mistakes. I get very flustered when making mistakes. And so I messed up on something. And instead of just, telling my manager, being upfront and open about it, I try to go behind the scenes, fix it before she even knew about it. And the problem with that is once you make a mistake, it's going to be a little bit obvious if it's like if it's a pretty brutal mistake, which it was, unfortunately. But I wish I just had the confidence to just be like, own up to it a little bit. Just say, hey, I messed up. Is there a way that you can help me fix this? Asking for help. I think it taught me a lot about myself as to like who I am as an employee. But it also gave me just a good jumping off point for the future, so that if I do end up making mistakes, which is okay, everybody makes mistakes, because nobody goes into a field knowing exactly everything there is to know about it. To just to own up into them and be very honest. If you cannot fix it before you get caught, there's no harm in it. I think it looks better if you tell your manager upfront about it rather than trying to hide it and sweep it under the rug. But yeah, that was probably like my biggest mess up, which I am very glad that it was something small but big enough that it made a lasting impression on my career, and me as an employee.
Well, thank you guys for, go ahead.
Well, the other decision I made coming out of college was I mentioned I got my MBA, and so I wasn't focused on getting my professional license. And so I put off taking the FE until about 5 years later after graduating. And that was a mistake. If I have one recommendation for the engineers coming out, graduating, is go ahead and start working on the FE and studying for that, because it's way easier now when you get right out of college, everything's fresh, than trying to have to go back 5 years later and study for it again. If you choose not to take the PE side of it, that's fine. But go ahead, all the information's fresh, take the FE now.
Those are great pieces of feedback, and I appreciate you guys both putting yourself out there and being a little bit vulnerable, and telling us those stories about those decisions that you wish you wouldn't have made, or maybe those mistakes. We have quite a few questions coming in, and so if you guys are fine with it, I'd love to transition to some of those live questions. One of which is pretty lighthearted, but Brad, this is for you. Have you ever wrestled an alligator?
I have wrestled an alligator. No, I have not wrestled an alligator. I unfortunately I have not.
Is that something you would ever do? I think would be another question that I would ask. Is that something?
It would depend on the situation, what the risks are. Part of my job is evaluating risks, and so I would have to do a full risk evaluation on, is the alligator, is its mouth tied? What's the risk of hitting me? Do I have the other end? How old is the alligator? Is it a baby alligator? Is it a mature alligator? So I would have to have a lot more details to answer that.
Completely understand that. Okay, so this question is again for Brad. You can tell we've got a lot of engineers on here. We got a lot of engineering questions. So you had stated earlier about your new job at Kleinfelder with little to no experience in the workforce. And maybe that was prior to Kleinfelder, I can't remember exactly when, but the question is, how did you handle that situation without that professional experience or hands-on experience? And then how would you suggest somebody approach it?
Yeah. To clarify, I started with Kleinfelder in 2011, came in as an entry level field engineer. And then I've slowly progressed up over the last 9 years to a project manager. So when you're coming into an entry level job, the best thing about it is the company knows it's entry level, right? So there are things in place to help you get trained, get onboarded, make sure you get the proper training in order to do your job. I think Amanda would agree. There's not going to be a situation where they kind of just throw you out there and say, all right, figure it out based off of no experience. I was teamed up with, the way we would do field work is we would have a team. And so we would have a field lead, and that person was responsible for the rest of the team on the field. And so when they know you're new, so less than 6 months, you would get a field mentor, and that person would be responsible for the job you're doing. So whatever your task is, he would be there, or she would be there to help you kind of progress through that process. And then when you got a little more experience, you wouldn't have that mentor anymore, but the expectations would still be there and they'd be set for you. And then as you continue to go through, you become the field lead. So I would say about year 4 or 5, I started leading the field events. And so that would even include, I would write the work plan. So we'd go out and I would write the work plan on, all right, this is what we're trying to capture. We're trying to get this data. These are the end results we're trying to prove, or these are the things we're trying to accomplish. And then I would go out and lead the team on what we're doing. But in terms of handling a job where you don't have any experience on it, most companies, at least that I'm familiar with, are going to have some sort of setup to help you get trained, so you're out there to be successful.
I'll open that up.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's exactly it. I wanted to get your opinion on that.
Yeah, I was going to add on, Bradley talked about having a mentor, like a team lead on his crew, kind of the same thing with Halliburton. So for field engineering, we, for all engineering disciplines, we have a HalPal for entry-level grads as well as interns, which is basically somebody that's graduated school within the last 5 years, very new to the corporate Halliburton environment, but also somebody that has had the lay of the land before and can guide the person, not on a managerial level, but just as that mentor, somebody to ask advice. We told students, a HalPal is there as a person that is basically with a sign over his head saying, no question is a dumb question. So we've had students ask HalPals, what time do we break for lunch? Or those very common questions, but also, hey, I've been assigned this project. What should be my next steps? And this is somebody that is offering no judgment, because they're there to teach you, help you become a better person, employee, engineer. But then also employees or entry-level grads have a manager as well, somebody that is, actually their manager, kind of teaching them about the lay of the land. So we do have a lot of bases covered for our entry-level grads, just not throw them out on the field and say, hey, good luck to you. Hope you're doing well. We'll check back in our 1-year review. A lot of companies do that. Halliburton's not the one. Because we really care about building that pipeline and growing our engineers from entry-level grads into potential manager, VP positions.
I mean, to that point, I think a lot of companies see it that way too, right? The company's more successful if they have their entry-level engineers advancing. You have less onboarding. They want to see that. So we want to put those things in place to help that happen. Some of it falls on the individual, asking questions like Amanda brought up, developing some sort of network, having mentors to help you kind of progress through that. but I would think that the company wants to see that. They want to see you succeed, because if you succeed, they succeed.
So Brad, we've got another question for you, really an engineering student question. And it's multifaceted, so let me read them all and then we can kind of condense them down a little bit. But while you were a student in school, where did you think you would end up as an engineer, or what was your vision? Did you have the exact idea of what you wanted to do? And if so, how did you narrow things down?
Okay. So I was a geological engineer. I thought I was going into oil and gas. I thought I was going to be on a rig someplace. And it didn't work out in terms of, there was a couple things going on. The market was down at the time I graduated. So there wasn't a lot of hiring going on. And my interest had faded some. So when I graduated with my undergrad, and I had just done a year of senior design projects. So I was a little worn out on that. And part of my senior design element was the financial economic side of it. And I had realized that I did not have that background. There was a lot I didn't know there. And so that's a lot of the reason why I pursued my MBA, was that I understood that a lot of businesses are going to make decisions based off that. And so I wanted that background. It's not necessary if you're going to go into engineering. I think it'd be beneficial somewhere, but if it wouldn't be my recommendation of every engineer needs an MBA. But it was something I saw in a gap in me, and I decided to pursue. What was the second part of that question?
It was how did you narrow it down if you had an exact idea of what you wanted to do?
I still don't know what I want to do. What I've noticed kind of going through this process the last 9 years is I've kind of gone with some opportunities that I've been given. And that's really worked out well for me. So I mentioned this earlier, but keeping that open mind, a good example is this, I was working in our Dallas office, and I was trying to advance to the next level. I was in the senior field lead role, where I was doing a good amount of office work, but it's still a lot of field work. And I was trying to advance to this assistant project manager role. And there an opportunity came up in Corpus Christi, and we were opening an office. We had just gotten a larger project, so we're going to open an office down there. And they had asked me to move down, and it would come with this advancement that I've been looking for. I've been waiting on, but it was in Corpus. So at the time I had talked to my wife about it, and we'd gone through a couple different scenarios, and we decided it wasn't the right situation to move. We weren't there in our lives yet. Just wasn't available. But I went back to the operations manager, and I said, I want to pursue this. This is something I do. Moving for 2 years isn't in the cards for me right now, but I want to work it out with you. And through a 2 or 3 week process, we were able to work out a situation where I could go down there 3 weeks at a time and still support them the best I could while I was down there, and then come back to Dallas for a week and still maintain that presence that they needed in Corpus. But by just talking to them and letting them know these are our concerns, this is what I can do, this is what I can't do, we were able to work out a solution that fit for both people. And I think in the long run, we both benefit from it.
Okay. So Amanda, I want to pose one to you that is really a similar question is being asked to Brad. So Brad, I'm going to come back with you on the specific question that's asked. But Amanda, what you see is a lot of people that come in and they beat people out of, fighting for the same position, right? And people that promote throughout the company. And so what would you say is maybe the top 1 or 2 key things that set somebody apart when they're looking at either a promotion or a hire?
Yeah. I think the question is kind of twofold. If you separate them, right, promotion versus a new hire. A lot of times in new hire, when the competition is really stiff, especially with those entry level grads, there's not a lot that sets students apart, right? They all have the same experience. They have all the same education, maybe the same student orgs. It's very on par with each other. So how do you differentiate between the students to make one student offer? I would say it's personality, right? We call it a motivational fit to the team, because when we do interviews, especially for engineers at Halliburton, the first interview is always with a person like me, a recruiter. It's more of the behavioral questions. It's more of getting the sense of the person. The second interview is with the team or the team manager specifically. And so a lot of times as a recruiter, when we're working closely with these teams to narrow down candidates, they tell us, Amanda, you know our team really well. You've worked with our team really well. Personality wise, which candidate is better? And so we have to look at it that way. So it's not always that candidate that we picked is the better candidate. It's just that candidate that we picked works best with that team personality wise. So I always tell students, don't get really sad, don't get upset if you're not chosen for an internship or a full-time position. It just, lastly, it might just have come down to personality fit. But one thing that students can work on in that respects is coming back to the networking. Are you comfortable talking to a manager on a level where you're not stuttering, or you're not nervous, or you can really give your personality across? And if you're a shy person, that's okay. There are some teams that are shy. It just depends on which team is interviewing for that position, right? So I think when it comes to entry-level full-time grads, the qualifying thing is just personality, unfortunately, and the way that you fit with that team. When it comes through internal promotion, I would probably say it's a couple things. Is a promotion spot available? We can't just promote somebody because that person is good. Obviously we would want to, but if there's no position available, there's no promotion to be given out. So there has to be a position available. The person has to be a good fit for the position itself. What traits, what projects have they completed to the best of their abilities? A lot of times at Halliburton, we look at the projects that they've done. And what I always tell students, and this is something that my dad told me when I was growing up, when I was starting to work, was as soon as you finish a project that has had like a big impact on a company when you started working, make a Word document or a Google document and write these things down. Write down every achievement that you've ever done within your company. Every month, if you sit down and write out, a sentence, what you've done, what you've accomplished, because you can actually take that Word document and make it into a letter when it comes to your, your yearly appraisal, your yearly review, and say, hey, I've done X, Y, Z. This is a list of documents, things I've done. I deserve a promotion or I deserve a raise because of these things that I've done. Because a lot of times when it comes to that yearly review, and I tell people, oh, well, what have you done that, you deserve this raise or you deserve this promotion? They're like, well, I've done a lot of things. I can't name them off the bat of my head because I can't remember them. Well, if you can't remember them and I can't remember them, why am I considering giving you a promotion, right? So I always tell students, write everything down, make sure everything is documented. So I hope that answered your question.
It does, and I think we're seeing a key trend here through all of these stories and all of these answers to the question. That trend comes down to communication. And I think Brad and you have both mentioned that just in the last two answers that you've given. It's just having that conversation, having the communication, and being able to communicate those big key things. So Brad, let me pose this question that came in from our attendees for you. And they're very specific to the transition from the field engineer to the project engineer. And so that you've said some things that helped you move up, and they're very interested in how the advancements in your career came and the process of moving up the ladder and how these changes have affected your daily activities and or tasks.
Well, I think Amanda hit on one element of it as you continue through your career, you can't really advance if there's not a spot there, right? So if we want to look at it on a couple simplified ladder, right? You have the field engineer, and then you have like a field engineer lead, and then you have a project engineer and a project manager. So how do you advance up through that ladder? A lot of it we talked about is taking multiple opportunities, being exposed to many things as you can, so that if you're working with one project team and then you need to transition to another project team that may have an opening, you have that background where you can jump. So it may not be a vertical jump, it may be a little lateral, but it may have a faster advancement path on the other side, right? So getting that broad background. The other thing I did personally was I always tried to do some of the work of the person that I was working with that was slightly above me. So if I was a field engineer, I would help and support the field lead and do some of their tasks. Because what that does is that allows them opportunity, because they want to advance too, right? So that helps them do the same thing for the person above them, because everybody wants to advance and move up the career. And so if you take on more work, you're gaining the benefit to getting experience doing it, right? So when you go in for your yearly review, you can say, I have experience doing this. I've helped out this person doing this task. And you can have that conversation that you've already done it. And it allows them an opportunity to not have to do that, and they can do something above them and they can have a similar conversation. So that's worked well for me. Our local Dallas operations manager, he started in the field with Kleinfelder as well. He came in as a lab tech. He's worked with Kleinfelder the last 25, 30 years, worked his way all the way up to the area manager, right? And he did something very similar, and he's the one who kind of taught me that is, if you continue to take these career opportunities, and sure, they're not exactly what you have to do, but it helps you advance your career and helps the other person advance their career. Everybody's winning, including the company.
So that brings me to another question that really ties along with this pretty close, Brad. But how has your day changed? And so as it unfolds now versus when you started, can you kind of give us a look into that?
So as a field engineer, a lot of my work was not local. So we would travel in to a site, and that was particular to the projects I was working. Some of the other projects in Dallas, they will be local. So it's not travels may not be something you're doing, but it was something I was doing a good bit of. You travel in, you would start in the morning. You would do a on-site meeting with your team and any third party. So you had your field lead and anybody else that was on the site. So if you were on another company's property, you would include them. You'd have a discussion about the day's work, and then you'd execute that work. Once you completed those activities, so if you're taking samples or if you were drilling, at the end of the day, you would log that information. So you would take field notes, or you would have other types of notes to log the information, and then you would document that. And everybody has a different way of doing it, but you would store it somehow for future use. A lot of field activities. So if I wasn't in the field, I'd be in the office prepping for those activities or processing the field data for the results. So everything kind of revolves around that task. As I've transitioned into project engineer, project management, it's a little, look at it as a bigger scale. So instead of looking at one event and what that one event is, you're looking at how all the events tie together, and then you're also processing the financials as well, right? So if you know you're going to have the whole project's going to take 5 or 6 events, you're managing all 5 or 6 events and you're processing that information. So it's at a level than if you're a field engineer where you're really focused on just that one event at that one point in time. Does that kind of just, does that answer the question?
I think so. I know he is still a attendee, and so if that answered your question, let us know, but I think you did a pretty good job from at least what I can understand the questions being asked. So this question was specific to as a student in engineering, but I'm going to twist it a little bit and open it up to both of you because I think it's important to see it on both sides. So what are some of the things you learned outside of school or in the real world that you wish you would have known going through your time as a student? And so, Amanda, I'll give Brad a chance to breathe for a quick moment after that answer. And are there any of those skills that you learned outside of school that you wish you'd have known as a student?
Are there skills that I wish I knew? I would probably say, oh gosh, email etiquette is probably something that I wish I knew going into a workplace after school, because I don't think I realized how many emails professionals send on like an hourly basis. Because growing up and then going to college, the only times I sent out emails were to myself to send, projects and documents. So I would have them in my email. But yeah, the way working out how to professionally write emails so you don't look like a newbie and you don't look desperate for help. B, I think as a woman, there are always times where we always have to kind of like apologize for being a bother, or we type in sorry to bother the first sentence of our emails, or a lot of exclamation marks. And I've had to kind of learn how to, be a professional when it comes to writing your emails and sounding appropriate, sounding well seasoned, because you have to realize, like, after a certain amount of time in your field, you become a subject matter expert in your field, right? So people are looking to you to solve kind of problems and situations. And I think there were a lot of times as well when I was in the workforce and it happens when you're like 19, 20, you're looking for the most adultiest adult in the room to like kind of base your questions and answers. And it's kind of like that when you're joining the workforce. You're looking for the most professional person to kind of also help you out. And you look around and you're like, man, okay, I'm the most professional person or subject matter expert in this position. And it's just coming to terms with that. So I think those are the two things that I wish I knew going to the workforce, that I was a little bit more confident in my skills and my ability, and not being afraid to say, hey, I don't know this, but let me find somebody who does. Let me put you in contact with somebody who does, or give me some time, give me 24 hours or by end of business, and I'll get back to you with this answer. And not saying, okay, I have to rush and find it out and freak out about it. So there were a few lessons, but I think you learn the lessons as you go on. I don't think anybody can I don't think that an infinite amount of leadership panels can prepare you for entering that workforce until you actually get into that workforce. And yes, it does help to know that there are other people that have lived those same experiences and lived those same anxieties that you might have. But a lot of it is just putting your boots on and getting down and dirty with it and realizing that everyone goes through it.
Brad, what about you?
I think the email is great. I 100% agree with the email. Just communicating in the professional world in general, but with emails, something I was told a couple years ago was there are always two different readers on an email. There's the person who wrote it, who think they wrote it one way, and you have the person reading it who may or may not have the same perception as you. And that's an art form. Is how to perfect that is an art form to make sure the person you're sending that email to perceives it and reads it the same way you do. And that's still a skill I'm working on, because there's a lot of times where I'm juggling a number of things, and I get an email in, and I want to send a 1-sentence response back, right? Just one sentence, hey, take care of this, and then moving on. And in my head, I'm thinking, all right, I'm delegating this out to somebody else to do it. But that's not always how it's received, right? If you're short, or if you word things a certain way, people perceive that differently. So I think learning how to write professional emails is a great one. Something that I did a poor job in college, and that I'm paying for and still trying to master now, is planning and scheduling out my time and day. In college, you have classes; those are regimented, but you have to manage how to study. You have to manage how you're absorbing all the information. You have to manage how you're getting all your notes together and how you're storing your textbooks and all that. But it's relatively managed. You have a class, and you have tests on these days. And a lot of times I was the one studying and cramming for a test the night before. And that's not something you want to do in the workforce. You want to make sure that you're planning out your day, and you're scheduling your day so that you can be as successful as possible and not have that crammed midnight feeling of, oh no, I got to get this done. So I would recommend making sure you start to budget out your day, plan it out, making sure you're organized, and learn to master that. Use the tools available too. Like, there's so many apps. There's all the email has calendars now associated with it, so you can link your emails with your calendars. Start doing that. Start learning to master that technology. I know Teams with Microsoft has that, and a lot of different apps. So learn to master that technology. That'll help with that.
I mean, I'll add on to that as well, because that's so perfect. I think when I graduated college and I started working full time, I had a really hard time transitioning to the point where I finish with work at 5 o'clock. What do I do with my rest of my day? I don't have any exams to study for. I don't have any homework. And so I think for a good 6 months, I struggled with, trying to find like a work-life balance, or coming back from work and being like, okay, now what do I do? Like, I literally have free time and I don't know what to do with myself. And so budget, like organizing your life, trying to make sure that you have your priorities in place, or a good what's the word? A good place to, sort out any issues that you might have, whether it's, putting some time away to go work out or focus on your mental health, and getting those skills early so that you have them later on in life. Because I did not prioritize taking care of my mental health while I was in that transition period. And I struggled with it, a couple of years ago, and trying to find that balance. So I think if you prepare yourself and take care of yourself and start it out doing it as soon as you graduate, or even when you're still in college, get those tools ready. It'll help you later on in life. Well, because you'll constantly come back to it, rather than struggling to figure it out once you started working already.
Well, that really wraps up all the questions that we've come in. We're right on an hour. And so, guys and attendees, I would tell you, if you have any more questions, pop them in there. Let us know, because we would love to answer them before we hop off. And we also have Janelle, the recruiter, senior recruiter for Kleinfelder. She has popped on now. And then, of course, Amanda is the recruiter for Halliburton. And so if you have any of those questions that are about internships and opportunities or processes, I know they would be happy to answer those as well. So while we're waiting on those, I'd like to expand a little bit on that work-life balance, because I think that comes up quite often. And it is an art form, right, on how we manage that. And so can each of you give us kind of the key, what you do in that commitment to yourself that you're making with that work-life balance?
So work-life balance is interesting because it's really based on the individual, right? my perception of work-life balance is different from your perception, was different from the next person. But I really think it's about setting boundaries. So as long as you establish what those boundaries are and you stick to those boundaries, I think you'll kind of develop those. So I have a separate work phone, like cell phone, so that when I started, it was pretty common. I think I'm now the only person in the office around 2 phones, but I have a separate work phone so that when I shut down for the day, if I want, I can put that phone in my bag and I'm not getting emails in my pocket all night. Right? I can separate myself if I need to, and I can return to it the next thing in the morning. And I know if it was coming to my personal phone, I would be checking them all night. I know I'd be doing that. So I forced myself to kind of have this separation. The other thing I'll do is working on vacation. Let's see, you get a lot of people who kind of complain they have to do work on vacation. What I've tried to do is set that boundary of letting my immediate team know I'm going on vacation this week. About a week or 2 out, I'll say I'm going on vacation during these dates. I'll be unavailable except for calling my cell during emergencies. If you need anything from me prior to those dates, let me know. I'll work with you. We'll get it scheduled. But giving them that advance notice and letting people know these are the times I'm available. Let's work within this boundary. And I think everybody is understanding of that. I mean, everybody wants to go on vacation. Everybody wants time off. Everybody wants that work-life balance. So I don't think anybody's trying to short anybody that. It's more of how do you define those boundaries? And that's really up to the individual. And as long as it works with the project team and you're still progressing your work and you're still being successful, then I don't think anybody's going to have a problem with having those boundaries and knowing what they are.
Yeah, so I always tell people my team or university recruiters just in general are the worst people to ask, do you have a work-life balance? Only because, we attend career fairs from like 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. We are constantly pre-pandemic flying to universities on weekends, after work. We are attending panels, or we are doing events or networking events literally almost every single day after your 9 to 5. So for us, a work-life balance is almost non-existent, but to kind of counteract that, we don't have day-to-day work-life balance. We probably have more of a month-to-month work-life balance. So when you guys are in school, we are actively recruiting. When you guys are out of school on like winter break, Thanksgiving break, even on the summers, even though we have an internship class, those are relatively downtimes for us. And we can just relax, take a deep breath, chill out for a little bit. Usually those are the times that you'll see, hey, I'm going to be out of the office for literally 2 weeks. Please don't contact me at all. But I will say, so last year, because of the pandemic, everything is virtual. Recruiting is virtual. I found it especially hard to keep that work-life balance separated. But what Bradley said, I have a work phone and I have a personal cell phone. So I ended up just forcing myself to leave my work phone downstairs in my office. And then as soon as it hits 5 o'clock, go upstairs. Don't worry about it. Nothing is, super dire, where if there was something super dire, my manager has my personal cell number. They can reach out to me on my personal and say, hey, really need you to address this problem right now. Can you hop on? And that's not a problem. Then it's also using your vacation time, respectfully. Bradley said it perfectly. Put your out of office on, be respectful for that. Last week, 2 weeks ago, I actually took 4 days off and I went to Austin and I stayed in an Airbnb doing nothing, but it was so much better than checking my emails and working. I just needed some time to focus on my own mental health, focus on my own personal growth. And I think that's so important, especially as a new hire, because as a new hire from college, you are wanting to exceed expectations. You don't want to seem like you're not available for every opportunity. And so a lot of college students we've seen suffer with their mental health because of it, because they keep pushing themselves and pushing themselves. And I think, like I talked about before, setting those boundaries, making sure that you are focusing or you have a ways to focus on your mental health is so important. And building those skills young rather than when you're 25 or rather than when you're 35 is so much smarter.
Well, thank you guys so much. I mean, you guys are on point with all of the stories and advice that you've given. I appreciate you coming on. We are right at an hour, a little over, and so we haven't had any more questions come in. So you guys did a great job. It looks like you answered all of it. And I would just welcome anybody that has any more questions that arise later. Let us know. We can get them to Amanda and Brad, and they, I'm sure, would be happy to answer those. But we appreciate both of you guys coming on and being part of our leadership panel and being part of the recruiting team here at Angelo State this month. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, you guys take your evening back. Have a great one, and we will be here throughout the week for all of the student needs. Thank you, Amanda and Brad. Y'all have a good night too.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.